Have you ever faced a moment that didn't just shake the ground beneath your feet but revealed the cracks in your closest relationships? For me, it wasn't just an earthquake, it was a reckoning. A moment that made me question what family truly means. What would you do if your world fell apart and the people you loved most left you behind? Hi everyone. My name's Emily. I grew up in sunny Southern California, where earthquakes are just part of life. Everyone here talks about the big one like it's a campfire ghost story. Growing up, my dad used to joke, if it hits, we'll just hold on to each other and ride it out. My mom always laughed, and David, my older brother, would add something sarcastic like, or we could just surf the wave. As a kid, I believed them. I believed that when disaster struck, we'd face it together. But as I got older, I started noticing the cracks in our perfect family facade. My parents were loving but absent-minded, more concerned with their weekend plans than with what was happening in my life. David, the golden child, got all the praise and attention, while I was labeled the responsible one. Being the responsible one meant I was the planner, the fixer, the worrier. If I didn't pack the first aid kit for camping trips, no one else would. If I didn't remind my parents to pay bills, they'd forget. I didn't mind at first. It felt good to be needed. But as the years went by, I realized I was the glue holding the family together, while no one seemed to care if I cracked under the pressure. On the morning of the earthquake, everything felt strangely ordinary. I was working from home, going through emails while sipping my second cup of coffee. I had no idea my entire world was about to shift, literally. The first tremor was faint, almost like a truck rumbling by, but then it grew stronger. My coffee mug slid across the table and toppled onto the floor, shattering. I barely had time to react before the walls started swaying and the ceiling light swung wildly. Instinct kicked in. I dove under the dining table, gripping its legs as the ground rolled beneath me. The sound was deafening, like a freight train roaring through my apartment. Books tumbled off shelves, dishes shattered, and a long crack snaked up the wall in front of me. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost as unsettling as the noise had been. My heart raced as I crawled out from under the table. My apartment was a wreck. Furniture was overturned, glass was everywhere, and my beloved bookshelf had collapsed into a heap of splintered wood and scattered novels. But I was alive. That was what mattered most. The first thing I did was grab my phone to check on my family. I called my mom. No answer. Then my dad. Straight to voicemail. Finally, David. Nothing. Panic clawed at my chest. My parents lived just 10 minutes away, and David was staying with them while saving for a house. Were they hurt? Trapped under rubble? I grabbed my car keys and headed out, navigating streets littered with fallen trees, cracked pavement, and frightened neighbors. Sirens wailed in the distance as emergency vehicles raced past. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I tried to convince myself they were okay. When I pulled into their driveway, relief washed over me. The house was still standing, but their car was gone. I knocked on the door, calling out, "Mom? Dad? David?" Nothing. Their neighbor, Mrs. Cortez, stepped out onto her porch, clutching her orange tabby cat. "Emily, you're okay," she exclaimed. "Have you seen my parents?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "They left early this morning for the mountains," she said. "Didn't they tell you?" The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. They'd left, knowing I lived alone and that an earthquake could strike at any moment, and hadn't even bothered to tell me. I muttered a thank you to Mrs. Cortez and stumbled back to my car, my mind racing. How could they do this? How could they leave without even checking if I was okay? With my apartment too damaged to stay in, I reluctantly moved into their house. I thought about calling them, but what would I say? Why didn't you care enough to warn me? It felt pointless. The house felt eerie without them. Every creak and groan reminded me of how empty it was. I spent my days cleaning up the mess left by the earthquake, scrubbing broken glass from the floors and throwing out spoiled food from the fridge. Part of me hoped they'd come back and feel guilty for abandoning me. When they finally returned 3 days later, they walked in laughing, sunburned, and carrying shopping bags. Hey, my mom said cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. I stared at them in disbelief. Where were you? The mountains, my dad said, shrugging. We told you we were going. You didn't tell me, I snapped. There was a massive earthquake, and you didn't even check if I was alive. My mom frowned. Oh, honey, we figured you'd be fine. You're always so prepared. David smirked. You're being dramatic. It wasn't even that bad. That word, dramatic, felt like a slap. For years, they dismissed my feelings as overreactions. This was no different. I packed my bags that night. I couldn't stay in that house, not after what they'd done. Over the next few weeks, I ignored their calls and texts. My mom left voicemails alternating between guilt-tripping and pretending nothing was wrong. David posted photos from their trip on Instagram with captions like, "Family time is the best time." The irony was almost laughable. I started therapy, trying to unpack years of feeling like the black sheep in my own family. My therapist helped me see that their behavior wasn't new. It was just the first time I'd allowed myself to acknowledge it. Just as I was beginning to heal, my mom called with urgent news. David lost his job, she said. He's really struggling. We've been helping him out, but we can't do it alone. We need you. I was stunned. They needed my help? When I hesitated, she added, Emily, he's your brother. Family helps family. David followed up with his own call. You're doing fine. You've got savings. It's not like you can't afford to help. I felt my blood boil. You think I owe you something after the way you've treated me? After you abandoned me during the earthquake? He laughed. You're being sensitive again. It's not that deep. I agreed to meet them for lunch. If they wanted my help, they needed to hear the truth. At the diner, I laid it all out. You abandoned me during the earthquake. You've dismissed my feelings for years. And now you expect me to fix your problems without even acknowledging the pain you've caused. My mom started to cry. My dad muttered something about me being too sensitive. David smirked and said, Good luck with that. That was the moment I realized they would never change. I stood up, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. I love you, but I can't keep doing this. I hope you figure things out, but I'm done being your safety net. Walking away was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was also the most freeing. It's been 6 months since that day. Cutting ties with my family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when it matters most. Mrs. Cortez, my therapist, and even some coworkers have become my chosen family. They've taught me that I deserve love that doesn't come with strings attached. So, what would you have done in my shoes? Did I make the right choice? Let me know in the comments below. If you've ever had to set boundaries with family, I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and remember, you are allowed to choose peace, even if it means walking away.